Planning Period podcast. My name is Jonathan Stovall, and my co-host is Dan McCarthy. Episode 10 is titled Standardized World. We have a few guests with us that are technically at other places in the world or the United States, whatever you want to say. But anyway, I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves after Dan. Dan, tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah, so Dan McCarthy, this is my fourth year teaching social studies at Chandler. So I have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I'm excited, love the position. It's great. It's a great place to teach. It's a great district to be in, but specifically the school at Chandler's, the staff there are awesome. The students are great. So I love everything about it. And I'm excited today to, obviously I love Stovall. I love our chats, just the two of us. I think they're great. But I think anytime we can bring in people that are probably much more knowledgeable, not probably, more knowledgeable, I'm going to take the probably out, more knowledgeable than us, I think it just does nothing but make us even better. So I'm excited to have our guests here as well.
Well, I brag on him about his working out, but I'm really excited that I actually get to see your face today. We don't have
I'm still undecided on the beard. I don't know. I keep telling my wife it's up to her. If she wants me to shave it, I'll get rid of it. This was a product of quarantine, so I decided to keep it. So I don't know. I guess people tweet at me, let me know what you think. I can handle it. If you think it's terrible, just tell me. I'll shave it. No big deal.
I like it. I'm really, really digging it.
Awesome.
I think that I might go dye mine like yours because I'm getting kind of gray, like Tom.
Yeah. What's wrong with gray? Huh?
Uh-oh. Was that your segue to introduce our first guest? Hey, you're getting kind of gray.
Hey, look, I'm getting better at this. Tom, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, well, my name is Tom Welch. I've been gray since I was about 35, white hair. But I am in Chicago, where we have about 30 inches of snow, and I think the wind chill this morning was still 6 below. But they say it's going to get warmer. I have been an educator for 40 years, I guess. Actually, a little bit more than that. Gosh. Most of that time in Kentucky as a teacher. I started out teaching at Henry Clay High School in Lexington and then switched to Jessamine County. Taught French there. I also worked at the Kentucky Department of Ed when the Kentucky Education Reform Act was just being launched. So that was a very exciting time. Then went back to Jessamine County as a teaching principal. We were allowed to open up a brand new school. We designed it along with my 2 assistant principals that many people know. Lou Young was one of them. Owen Saylor was the other. They all went on to very distinguished careers. And so now I have just been for the last 15 years working with folks around the country and some folks around the world on how to help kids learn better. It's all about relationships and all about causing learning.
Before we move into our next guest, Tom, I want to let people know that I absolutely love this man. I met him about a year ago, and he's been an asset to me. He has helped me with a lot of questions. He is definitely a master educator in all aspects of that. So if you know anybody in Kentucky and they talk about Tom Welch, no joke, what you hear is true. He is amazing.
That's very kind of you, Jonathan. Thanks.
My next gentleman has a great reputation as well. Guy, if you don't care, tell us a little bit about you and possibly a little bit about the sustainable energy stuff that you're working on.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Dan. My name's Guy Hamlin. I am a middle school social studies teacher on the coast of Maine in Belfast. This is my 28th year. Thank you for mentioning the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm actually teaching remotely this year. The majority of my colleagues have been in person since September, but we had a small collection of parents who chose to have their kids stay remote. And luckily, the superintendent of our district said, well, let's have a dedicated remote team. So I'm teaching grades 6, 7, and 8 from home this year. And one of my big pushes over the past years has been the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm big on the posters. Don't get me wrong, I love social media and I like to see this on Twitter and Facebook and other places, but nothing beats a good old-fashioned poster. In fact, I'm in the process of mailing more posters around the world. I just filled out some labels for Singapore, the Philippines, and South Africa. So I'm going to be sending out in my boxes here some more posters around the world, because I really do think the only way to get this top of mind with kids is to have it on a classroom wall all the time. doesn't need electricity, doesn't need internet, and it's there top of mind all the time. And I do think it's a slam dunk curricular tool. There's something in here for everyone, and kids get to take action on things that matter. I call it strut. Stuff that's relevant, useful, and timely. That's what we start with in September. If teachers aren't teaching kids stuff that's relevant, useful, and timely, then what's the point? I'm really happy to be here and have a quick chat about standardized testing.
Awesome, guy. I appreciate it. And if you really want to, mail me one of those posters and I'll put it up here. But guys, Guy is actually going to work with Adairville School and hopefully with Dan sometime soon to do a joint project between states and between schools. So I'm really excited about that as well. Guy is an awesome resource as well. If you follow him on Twitter or if you follow him, like reach out to him in email, the dude is a genius, absolute genius. The next distinguished colleague that we have that I want her to introduce herself. Now, she makes me feel a little inferior with, the doctor label, because I know that I definitely cannot compete with her intelligence, but love every time she speaks. She has great insight and she is a wealth of knowledge to the team and to everybody that comes in contact with her. Beth, do you care to introduce yourself?
Thanks, John, and thank you for that introduction. I'm touched, and I absolutely love the ability to share with everybody and to be part of our group. It's just amazing. I am an educator. I have definitely over 40 years of experience as a classroom teacher, school administrator, principal, superintendent. In my various roles, I've been a teacher and administrator in Pennsylvania. I have been a principal in Massachusetts. I currently live outside of Boston, but actually I was a principal in the 90s in Massachusetts in a middle school here. It was my first administrative job as a principal. And then I was a principal and superintendent in New Jersey. I've worked at elementary, middle, and high school levels, and also have been very active in ed reform, particularly at the middle school level, transforming junior highs into middle schools many years ago. Now after attending law school, I am an adjunct professor of school law and policy and also special ed law, and enjoying my role in that regard and finding a place where I'm looking at the impact of laws and legislation on access to education, and finding that an absolutely fascinating study, especially right now as we're moving into some virtual platforms. The other thing of note, particularly regarding today's topic, is that in my various roles, I've been responsible for state testing in New Jersey, especially. And so I have a real strong interest in how we measure our students and why we are doing some of the measurement that we are doing. So it's great to be here. I'm really happy to join you.
Thank you, Beth. I appreciate it. So I'm gonna start the conversation like this, and then I'm gonna ask Dan his opinion, because Dan is actually in the classroom like Guy right now. Myself, Tom, and Beth, we're not directly in the classroom, so it doesn't affect us as much, but it still does. So when I taught fourth grade, I taught fourth grade reading, math, science, social studies, everything, language. And my analogy for the testing in the state of Kentucky, which is not a knock. This is not a knock on the testing program for Kentucky, but the K-Prep for reading, that's a great assessment of reading. And the K-Prep for math, that's a great assessment of reading. And the K-Prep for science, that's a great assessment for reading. And the K-Prep for language, that's a great assessment of reading. So if our kids can't read, they can't do this. And the reason I say that is because I taught in the inner city of Bowling Green, where my question is, why do we live in a standardized world when we're asking every student to show their knowledge in the same way, on the same test, on the same day even? I mean, what if Dan woke up and somebody just spilt his cereal, or the dog like drunk out of his cereal bowl? He's going to have a bad day. Dan, what is your thoughts on standardized testing?
Yeah, I agree. And something we talked about a little bit for a couple weeks now. Mother Nature kind of got in our way a little bit. We hope to do this topic sooner, but going off of what Guy said earlier about students and working on something that's relevant and timely, well, for teachers, this is a relevant and timely topic. It's something that we discuss all the time. This year, especially in the midst of the pandemic and all the virtual learning and how crazy it's been. But I totally agree. And to go off what you said specifically to Kentucky, one thing I've still never really gotten a great answer for Kentucky, social studies, middle school, they get tested one time, students that is, one test in 8th grade, but it covers topics for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I've still never fully understood the point or purpose of that. So if someone could explain it, that would help me out. But I totally agree. I think that the reason that standardized testing looks the way it does is because it's the most convenient, it's the easiest format, it's the greatest way to get data really, really quickly. But is that data actually meaningful? Does it actually prove what kids know, what they're learning, what progress they're making? And I think the answer, everyone in education, students, teachers, parents, everybody is going to say, no, it's not. So moving forward, how do we adjust that? Because I do think testing has its purpose. I'm not saying get rid of testing altogether, but I think we need to find better ways to actually test what's going on in the classroom. Like when you look at the state standards, it says things like analyze causes and effects of the Revolutionary War. Well, yeah, you can certainly ask a multiple choice question and get some idea, but I can't imagine that a multiple choice question is the best way to truly understand if a student can analyze and then do something with that analysis. You know, and I'm saying there's got to be better ways. I know I certainly don't have every answer, but I know there's just better ways to find out what kids are actually learning than simply a multiple choice test.
But you certainly do.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
You have a nice beard, though.
Oh,
so,
well, I appreciate it.
Guy, bounce off. Like, what are you thinking? The same, because you teach the same content area in a different place. As we have another gentleman joining us, I'll introduce him in a minute. But Guy, what are your thoughts?
I'm really glad that social studies is not one of the topics that is tested on a regular basis. It's generally math and language arts, and I have lots of thoughts on this. I feel like it pits teachers against teachers. I know in my building, and the grade I usually teach is 8th grade. The 8th grade language arts teacher, I don't know if she'll watch this or not, but she in the past has made it very clear that her topic is more important than other topics. And it's because it's a tested topic, whether it's the NUIA or the main assessment or whatever assessment is the flavor of the year. Math and language arts get this push as being the important topics, and science and social studies and the arts get pushed to the side, which I think is patently unfair. And Dan says there's a place for testing. I haven't given a test in a decade. I just don't believe in it. If you are going to do testing, I think it needs to be local testing. I think all assessment needs to be local. I don't think there's any need to compare kids in Maine and Arizona and California. I have a million different thoughts, but I'll let someone else speak right now, Jonathan.
All right, Tom, you have been in Kentucky. You actually were an administrator in Kentucky. You're a teacher in Kentucky. I know some of your philosophies on testing. Share with us what your thoughts are on standardized testing, or how students can demonstrate learning.
Yeah, those are two very different issues. How can kids demonstrate learning is not necessarily done solely through standardized testing. And, you know, I think it's important to be able to have kids let us know what they've learned and what they can do. But I find that standardized testing is missing the mark that it was intended for. And, you know, like I said, I've got plenty of gray hair. I've been around a long time. And I actually was working with the Council of Chief State School Officers as a consultant when the topic started to really, really gel around the country. And, you know, there were some good things, some good reasons why standardized testing was put into place. And most people think this has been forever. And while we had things like the Iowa test of basic skills and some things like that, it was not the same as the standardized testing industry that we have in schools today. But one of the reasons, Jonathan, it started was when people looked around the country, they knew that there was terrible disparity among the opportunities for learning that kids were given and what the result was, because we had many places where kids were just really suffering from a really poor education. So education leaders around the country kind of started looking at that. Particularly the governors were some of those around it. When the early results started coming back, people were, off the charts in terms of variation. So the idea was, you know what, let's, instead of all these different tests and nobody can compare anything, let's try and have something that is standardized so that we can at least look. And actually, the idea was not a bad one. It was, this is going to show us where districts are that have kids who are struggling, and we can pour resources into there, get help there, so that those kids have a better shot. It was a noble idea, but as we all know, 30 years later, whatever it's been, in practice, it has not been like that. And Kentucky was quick out of the gate. We had a guy who was tremendous at the Kentucky Department of Ed, came in with the Kentucky Education Reform Act, named Ed Reedy, who was absolutely a genius when it came to assessment. And his idea was, boy, these are going to be preliminary and we're going to keep evolving. We even had performance-based assessments in science as part of the state assessment system. But, as things went, frankly, it went in another direction until we're left with the situation we have now. And, I'm more like Guy. I would not cry for a minute if we did away with standardized testing the way we have it. I think it's horrible for kids and for teachers. It's great for people at the policy level to try and say, oh, we've got data so we can do things. But just one more comment. I'm always reminded of my favorite book, The Little Prince. And The Little Prince, there's a story in there where he talks about grown-ups, big people. They like numbers. They don't ask the right questions because they think that if you tell them numbers, that you've given them good answers. But go back and read that book and you'll find out a little bit more maybe as to why I don't think that standardized tests and reducing kids to data points is a good way to go forward.
Tom, I love that segue, because one of my things, and I know it's yours as well, is that relationships. You have to understand who that child is, not as a student, not as a number, but as a person. And you really got to understand how they learn best, how they demonstrate that learning best, and that's going to enable them to be more successful. Anthony is joining us, and I don't know if he can hear us. So Anthony, if you can hear us, go ahead and unmute, introduce yourself. While you're doing that, I'm going to show the inner fourth grade teacher in me and say this before Anthony or Beth start talking, is that, so if this guy was in your classroom, would you ask this guy to show his knowledge the same way as this guy? I would say not. I would say that Yoda, Star Wars geek here, Yoda probably has a lot more knowledge than Curious George. So I would expect Yoda to show me learning differently. If Anthony cannot unmute for us, Beth, what are you thinking on standardized testing?
I'm jotting down notes as I'm listening to everyone speak here. It's really interesting. One of the things that I think of when I'm dealing with the whole topic of standardized testing is marginalized groups that are involved in standardized testing. In particular, two groups: students with special needs whose parents are really, really intent upon having that IEP reflect additional time for testing, which doesn't often really make a difference, because you take a child who has, let's say, a problem with an attention deficit and you just give them more time, and it becomes this cavernous space that it's very difficult for them to perform well to begin with. So I worry about that. I understand the rationale behind parents requesting that and making that a priority, but in reality, it's not helping in many, many cases. The other piece is that I once, in one of the schools where I was an administrator, was filling in as a proctor for our state exam, and I was working with students who were English language learners. And I have to tell you, just to see the students in that class, some of whom who were recent entrants to our school, who still were really struggling with English to begin with, then have to actually report out on a standardized assessment what they knew. We weren't getting an accurate accounting of what they knew in any way, shape, or form. And so the frustration, because those numbers are incorporated with the other numbers of all of the students in the districts, is it really giving an accurate picture? And the answer is no. I was in a district where we had been asked to participate in the National Assessment of Education Progress. And I believe it was our fourth graders. And I said to them, to the agency, I said, okay, when will we find out how we did, how our results measured up in terms of the national results? And they must have thought I was totally crazy. They said, well, if you're not getting them back. I said, well, then what is it giving us? What is the purpose? I mean, obviously you feel you have a greater purpose, but it's not helping me as a school administrator have any more data to work with in terms of helping my student population and my teachers. One of the most effective things I've ever seen in terms of reporting out of what students have learned was one of my middle schools where the students, we were having a great problem with parents showing up for parent conferences. And so one of my teams said, you know, we'd like to try something different. We would like to have student-led parent conferences. It was the most amazing phenomenon. We had, first of all, almost 100% of our parents show up in that particular team. It was remarkable when we compared the data from that team to the other teams in the building. And the kinds of information that the students shared about what they were learning and how they were learning and what their needs were, parents were just unbelievably overwhelmed by what they found out about their children. And having that dialogue between the parents and the teachers and the children in one place was just an amazing thing. So there are so many ways. That's just one example, but there are many much more effective ways of knowing what our students have learned than the standardized testing. And yet I understand, Tom, the rationale behind it at the beginning, and it's used for funding. But even there, looking at the funding, I was in a district that was a very affluent district. And we had our students who were Title I students, and we received our money for helping those students. But I had so few of them, and the rules for how you can use that money were so restrictive that none of the providers wanted to come to my school district because, frankly, I didn't have enough kids to really make it worth their while. And so here we were. What am I supposed to do? And I have to report back to the government about how the money is being used. It was an unbelievable experience from my end, seeing how the system was flawed.
Beth, thank you. I think Anthony has some service now. Anthony, do you have some service? My wait time is awful, by the way. Tom and I've talked about that.
Hey,
Yes.
Jonathan.
Yes, go for it, man. Introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from. Tell us a little bit about you. And then tell us what you think about standardized testing in your role or in your role as a teacher. Just go with it.
Got you. My name is Anthony Finley. I am the student services coordinator at a school district just south of Atlanta. Before that, I was an assistant principal at a high school. Before that, I was a school counselor. I actually worked at 2 high-performing schools and 2 alternative schools. And before I did that, I was a teacher and a football coach.
Awesome, man. Also, if you didn't know Anthony, if you get to know him through Twitter, you'll know that he and I were the misbehaving children in the class.
Oh, absolutely.
But anyway, Anthony, standardized testing. We've heard Tom. Tom told us how it started. We've heard Guy, and I love Guy's rationale about why we shouldn't do it. And we've heard Beth give us insight about funding and about different states and about her experience with it. Tell me your thoughts, because you're from a city that's right south of Atlanta. And I'm going to go ahead and guess that the population in Atlanta is pretty diverse, and socioeconomic status is probably not very equal. So tell me what your view is on standardized testing.
You know, I my thought on it has always been, like everyone else in the group, I don't think you need a final period to know if students have learned, right? If we're assessing kids properly as we should be throughout the year, and we don't know what kids have learned or haven't learned, then we've dropped the ball as educators, and we've dropped it repeatedly, or we never even picked it up, to be honest with you, to even begin to drop it. And my thought on standardized testing is I actually think they're assessing the adults. To be honest with you, I don't think they're really assessing kids. I think it's just another way of sorting and ranking schools. And I think that's for this is probably going to sound bad for overzealous parents and systems and colleges and all those things. I think it puts a lot of unnecessary stress and pressure on students. I remember my first year giving it when I was a special ed kid. I had a kid throw up in class. I was like, and I just remember thinking to myself, this can't be what this was intended for. And I don't remember being that stressed about these tests when I was a kid. But maybe my teachers were. I remember a teacher walking by when I was taking the ITBS in the 5th grade and pointing out the answers on certain tests or for certain questions. So that's kind of my thought on it in a nutshell. I wouldn't be obsessed with one way. I'm interested in the whole test backing up the school year. So and understand it and I'll start packing it up as well. So I just think I think it has more, definitely more negative effects on us than positive.
Yeah, Anthony, I love so much that you said there. And I think the thing that jumps out to me the most is the fact that if we're waiting to the end of the year and that's the first time we're really trying to figure out what kids know, we've dropped the ball repeatedly. I couldn't agree more, which makes me think, going back to the idea that we're certainly not saying that we get rid of this altogether, but what can we do to try to figure out, okay, clearly there's something that needs to be changed with the standardized testing. I think almost every educator is in agreement. Why can't we allow students to choose and demonstrate their own individual way about how they can master these standards? So, okay, this is the standard that I'm supposed to be learning. Well, I'm not really a paper, pencil, test kind of person, but I'm really creative. I love building things. Why can't I build something to demonstrate that I've mastered this standard? And why can't I do that if this is something we're learning in September? Why can't I build this in September? And then that counts for my proving that I've learned this standard. And I think that's the way we need to shift our thoughts on standardized testing, where it's still a test, but it's not necessarily a multiple choice extended response test. It's more of a student showcase on work, student showcase on knowledge, what they've learned, what they've been able to build and create. I guess my biggest question, and just right now being a classroom teacher, and I know you guys most of you are beyond the classroom, but how do we make that change? If us in the trenches, us in the classrooms, in the buildings, we want these changes to happen. I think students want the changes to happen. How do we make that change happen? And Tom, I guess I'm going to throw the ball to you first, and I'm sure it's not an easy question to answer, but how do we make that change as teachers and as principals and administrators?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Dan. It's standardized testing is used for a lot of things, but not necessarily to assess what a student has learned. And that seems counterintuitive, but your description of, hey, let's give kids the chance to show us how they have learned something and what they've learned about a particular thing is great. And on an individual basis, that's what we certainly can do. The problem comes for the psychometricians who are trying to say, oh my gosh, though, how do I take, some project that John has done in September where he's built something and try to compare that in a fair and valid way to what somebody else did months later and did it in a completely different format, maybe wrote an essay. And so it's kind of cross purposes. And we could say a lot about assessment, and maybe Jonathan will have, or you guys will have program one time on just assessment and how to change assessment. But in terms of how do we make the change away from standardized assessments, hey, listen, you've got the door open for that this year. The pandemic, like nothing else, has provided the opportunity for teachers in the trenches to say no, no, and for parents to start saying no. And I've been a big fan of the opt-out movement, which doesn't always play well with my friends who are administrators. But I'm one who says, no, I'd have my kids opt out, particularly this year, because there is absolutely no way that these assessments are going to be valid and reliable and can be used in any way to look at any results from any other time. It just can't be done, even if people tell you it can. It's foolish to make decisions about kids and about schools based on what's been going on. So like I say, this is the year that the door is open. And I know in Kentucky, even the chair of the state board is really looking with the board at this issue quite carefully to say, hey, what do we have to do legally, but what do we do as educators that is closer to the right thing for kids and for teachers?
Awesome. Tom, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm going to go to Guy in a second and ask how you do that in your classroom. But I first want to let everybody know that Anthony, he's not just a smart gentleman. He's also got a pretty face. So his face is available now. He's got it all shaved up nice and neat. He looks good, almost as good as Dan's beard, but definitely better than mine. But Guy, how do you assess in your classroom right now? Because I know that you don't like standardized assessments. What are you doing right now?
It's very project-based. The way I kind of operate, I have several kind of guiding systems, if you will. Use the C3, and I'm sure Dan is familiar with this, the C3 framework for social studies, where they really want you to focus on teaching kids how to think historically and civic-mindedly and economically and geographically. But I also use the Asia Society Global Competency Matrix. Teach kids how to investigate things, see perspectives, communicate, and then take action. So my school year, I spend the beginning from September until early spring. We do mini units trying to teach kids how to think geographically. And it's kind of some classic vocabulary and all that, but we always culminate with something where the kids have built out some sort of project and they have to share it with someone else. And it needs to be beyond the classic do your project and then present it to the class. That is so 1990s. It's not good enough anymore. So we're sharing with first other groups within the school, and then we're sharing with the community. We're sharing on Twitter. We're putting our information out there for consumption and for critique out to larger audiences. So that's what I'm doing to have kids show me that they understand what they're doing. So these mini projects we start with geography, and then we do economics, then we do history, and we do civics. And in the spring, they all get to do independent projects. The last couple of years, 10 straight weeks. I tell the kids, you have five projects you can do. You have 10 weeks to get them done. I'm going to sit over there at my desk. You're going to report out every day and tell me what you've done for the day, what your plan is for tomorrow, what you need help on. And every 7 days, they have an individual interview with me. We talk about where they're at. And at the end, they're expected to have 5 projects done. And if they want to do a project on Justin Bieber, good for them. That's relevant or useful or timely to them. But they have to tell me the history of Justin Bieber, the economics of Justin Bieber, the civics of Justin Bieber, and the geography of Justin Bieber. So that's how I do my thing. No tests, no quizzes, very little homework. And it works, and there's buy-in, and the kids love it. They pay attention at the beginning because they know they're going to get to do this independent work at the end, and it's worked really well for me. Fully remote this year, it's going to be a little bit of a different story. We'll see how it goes.
Guy, the way you approach things is absolutely an excellent example of what I talk about all the time, and that's the difference between teaching and causing learning. You have decreased the amount of teaching that you do, and Anthony's smiling because he knows how often I say that. But what you've really done is you've caused learning to occur, and that's very different even from the way the brain learns. So keep up the good work.
Yeah, I got to say it's awesome, and I don't know if any of you, I know obviously Mr. Stovall is familiar with it, but here at Chandler's where I teach, this is our first year of using the Summit Learning platform, and their curriculum is set up very similar to what you just described. Now, the one exception, we do have little mini units that do end with a quiz that culminates a 10-question quiz, just essentially proving that kids have just a basic general understanding of vocabulary, some important things, but the bulk of their grade, what actually determines how they do in the class, comes from project-based learning that we essentially just roll right down the road, one project into another. And then the last project of the year that Summit has, they call it essentially a capstone, where the kids are basically taking some sort of topic that fits with the curriculum that's purely their choice. Obviously, the teacher is there to provide guidance because not every student can jump right in like others can, but that's very similar to how Summit does it. So for you to be doing that on your own, I think is pretty incredible. It's something I've wanted to do myself in my classroom, but it's always been a challenge and a struggle, and something that I've dragged my feet a little bit, but I'm glad that we really made that transition to Summit this year, because a lot of that pre-work was done for me. And I feel the same way, where I don't necessarily feel like I'm teaching the same as I've done before, but I definitely feel the kids are learning as much, if not more, than they've learned in the past, with me taking more of a facilitator type role, where I'm providing kids with resources, I'm there to assist, but really it's truly them leading their learning. And I think that's awesome. Also, I got to say, for the most part, though, I tend to think the 1990s were probably like the best decade around. I don't know. I'm a product of the 90s. That's when I grew up. So I love the 90s. Maybe their testing practices might not have been the best. And also, with all the talk, I got to give a shout out to a couple of the teachers. I can't remember if it was Mrs. Cunningham or Mrs. Pryor at my school, but they started it. They said when I grew the beard out initially, I looked like a young Chuck Norris, and then a couple of the students kind of jumped on. I was amazed at how many kids knew Walker, Texas Ranger even now. I guess the reruns are still available. So all the talk about the beard, I guess I got to give them a shout out that, the young Walker, Texas Ranger, although I don't quite have the roundhouse kick that he had. But so Beth, what are your thoughts? I know you said that at a time you spent some time actually working on standardized testing boards. And so I don't know, what are your thoughts about where do we kind of go with standardized testing, whether it's this year, whether it's moving forward? Just what are your thoughts?
Well, it was interesting listening, Dan, to you and to Guy, and a connection between what you were saying, or what Guy was saying, and where it could take you and people in general in schools. Guy's point about the community focus and having students engage with a larger audience, I think is really, really important, because you can take a look at the standards, and you can look at them as standards, and you can look at them within a textbook and within that small range of what a student would normally do within that classroom unit. Or you can take a look at them and say, okay, there's a bigger issue here. How can we take the elements of what we're studying, or the standards, and how can we apply it to make a difference in the world? And so part of that is the community focus, is having that larger audience. And one of the things that can be done, and teachers and school boards and administrators can work together, looking at school stakeholders as a whole, engaging the community and saying, what is our vision for success? What does learning look like? There was a time when, depending upon the district, one of the visions for success, this was in a very affluent district that I was a part of. Well, one of the visions for success was the student rate getting into colleges, and particularly in this particular district, getting into Ivy League colleges. But then the question came up, okay, so what happens? They get into college, do they finish? Do they graduate? Where do they go? And all of a sudden, when people started to ask that question, not necessarily in this district, but in general, because it expanded well beyond this district, people were saying, no, they're not graduating in the numbers that we expected they would. And once they've graduated, where are they going with what they've learned? And so it truly is a bigger structure that we need to take a look at, a much more engaging structure, so that we can see what an impact what we're doing in the pre-K to 12 and beyond system is having in our community and in the greater world. So those are the kinds of actions that can take place, that can start. The dialogue has to happen. And it's small. You start, Tom, you talked about your tuning forks and how we resonate. A lot of these ideas resonate from one person to another. But in order for that to happen, you have to talk about them and you have to bring them up in common forums that can be held. So from that, a lot of opportunity will present in terms of what would be the best kinds of ways for us to tell that our students are achieving. And, as Tom said, standardized testing has been used for things beyond simply measuring achievement. It's been used for funding and so on. And I think there are a lot of better answers for that as well. But I think from the classroom teacher's perspective, there's a tremendous amount of influence that can be had in terms of how students impact that greater world and have those conversations.
Beth,
I love it. And Stovall, I know you might have been ready to say the same thing I was going to say, but it just speaks directly to what I know our district, and I'm sure other districts in the area have done with our profile of a graduate. It later became profile of success. Exactly. I know Mr. Mullins was hoping to be here. It looks like he won't, but couldn't have been a more better segue to get to him, because he would have loved hearing that, because that's exactly what I know our district is trying to do and what we're working to build in the future.
Yeah.
Awesome. Beth, love it. Dan, you're right. Our district is trying to do that. GQ, down there in the corner, my GQ magazine friend that looks all nice and spiff. Tell me what you guys are doing to measure success, or how you think, even in Atlanta, it's different than rural Logan County. How can you measure student success without doing it on a standardized test? And guys, I'm going to give Anthony a hard time. I've known him for a while. The man is genius. He's brilliant. But like I said, he's not just smart. He's also a pretty face. So maybe one day I'll grow up and be like you, Anthony. You're going to have to unmute, man.
Sorry about that. All right. I'll kind of start in a different spot and then pick you.
I'm out. I complimented you, man. I'm talking about.
Yeah, thank you.
And then we get like 30 seconds of unmutedness. You're making me look bad. Hurts my
I'm so sorry. I apologize.
I'm gonna go cry. I'll be right back.
You got to stop telling these lies about me. I'm messing with you. All right. But I'll kind of want to piggyback off what Beth and Tom said and Guy and circle back to your question. I think the first thing is we really got to come back to what our goal is and what we're taking as learning. And I don't know if I said that right, but I'll explain myself. So one of the high performing schools I worked at, our scores literally were 99.9. That's what they came back as, right? All the content mastery was 100, the progress, that whole deal. But the employers in the same town are saying they can't employ our kids because they can't think, right, for themselves. And my question to my principal was, well, what are we achieving? So, and as Beth said, it's the same thing. It's one of these schools where the kids walk in the 9th grade and they're like, Mr. Finley, do I have enough rigor in my schedule? And I'm trying to get to Georgia Tech, and I'm like, you're just walked into the 9th grade. It's like, but I think we started to take those measures and say, like, this represents learning. And as I was speaking to a friend of mine actually just yesterday who was looking for an area to live in a school for his kids, and he was telling me, like, I'm looking at like their test scores and the free and reduced lunch numbers. And I told him, that may not be the best place to start. Free and reduced lunch numbers are out of anybody's control, right? That is what it is. And like in that school I worked at, realistically, most of those kids could have walked in on the first day of school and aced that standardized test. And I suggested to him, look at the reviews on the school, see what the kids are saying. Are they talking about being connected and people helping them, people caring about them, things of that nature. So really, start paying attention to our kids and seeing what they're saying. So that's kind of one of my first thoughts. I definitely agree with you guys about the broaden in the authentic audience. It should just be about learning, and I just don't think the things that we're taking as learning are necessarily learning, and we've moved the goalpost, right, to just these scores and numbers and things of that nature. So as far as assessing what kids know, Jonathan, and my hat's off to Dan and Guy, because I truly believe the most important position in the school is teacher, right? In the district, the
Missed you.
All right, we lost Anthony's audio, so I'm going to let him know that. But guys, Tom, Guy, Anthony, Beth, thank you so much. I'm sorry we lost Anthony's audio. Anthony, if you heard that, we lost your audio, so I apologize. I'm handing it from one pretty face, Anthony, to our last pretty face, Dan, to wrap it up for us, because I have enjoyed this conversation. Tom, thank you so much. Guy, Beth, Anthony, thank you. One day, maybe I will be as clean as Anthony, and someday I will never have a beard as nice as Dan.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and yeah, like Jonathan said, we love you guys for coming out and being a part of this today. I thought it was awesome. Each and every one of you made great points. The one I just wanted, the very last one that Anthony made at the end, is we got to think about what's the goal in mind. And I think if we have a clear-cut goal of what we're hoping to achieve, then I think we can get everyone going in the right direction. I thought that was just a great point to end on. So for everybody watching, I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to listen. Give us feedback. Let us know what your thoughts are. We'd love to hear from the viewers and know, hey, maybe the 6 of us are way off point. I don't think that we are, but maybe we are. So good, bad, indifferent, whatever. Let us know. I'd love your feedback, and hope that you can maybe tweet it out, let more people know, and we'd love to get a bigger following, and hope to get you as a viewer moving forward.